Hi, welcome back to the Boxes of Lights game channel. Now, unlike the ranged siege attack in player versus player combat, it's the aggressor who gets to act first in melee attack. So, Naros is going to choose to attack first. Just like in normal attack, you can use your cards in any other way. You can play them sideways to add attack. When we were doing ranged siege attack, remember you can't use cards sideways to create ranged attack. But now we're talking normal, regular attack, so I can. So I could, for example, play improvisation for attack 5. I have to discard a card when I use improvisation, and then play a card sideways for attack 6. If, of course, there was a red mana in the source. So let's assume that's what I've done, and I've generated 6 attack. Once more, I'm going to use these little tokens just to help us with our understanding here, and there should be 6 for the 6 attack that we've just generated. Now during this part, the melee attack works exactly the same as the ranged siege attack of player versus player combat. In other words, it's the attacker who chooses how to spend or allocate that 6 damage. So he can, if he wishes, Norowas could choose to spend 2 attack there to put a wound on the herbalist. And then he could choose to spend the other 4. Remember, Goldix armor is 2, to put 2 wounds on Goldix. Okay? The only difference now between siege attack is that blocks can work completely. So I can use 2 block here to remove 2 points of attack. Okay, so it's not, this normal melee attack doesn't act like it has swiftness like the ranged attack does. So I can use block 2 here to remove 2 points of attack. And again, I can use, a sideways card to remove 1 point of attack. Another one, 1 point of attack. Okay, another one, 1 point of attack. So I can do that as much as I wish. Okay, so that part of it's pretty straightforward. So it's exactly the same as ranged siege in player versus player, except the blocks work fully, and you can play cards sideways to generate attack. Okay, there's one other difference in melee attacks, and that's the way you can spend your attack points. There's one other thing you can do. Your attack points can be converted into move points and spent to force the blocker to retreat. Alright, so this sounds a bit unusual, but let's see how that would work. Firstly, let's assume that Goldix does reduce the attack somewhat using block. So let's use 3 cards sideways. Anyway, Goldix decides he wants to hold on to some of these cards because he wants to have a little fight back, because the next thing that's going to happen is once you've finished with Norowas attacking Goldix with melee, they swap roles just like in Ranged Siege. Goldix will then get an opportunity to attack Norowas back. So let's reduce the attack by 3 using 3 cards sideways for 3 block. And let's assume, okay, let's say, alright, I've got 3 attack left. I'm not going to use them to wound you. Instead, I'm going to convert these 3 attack into 3 movement points. Okay? What he can do then is he can force the blocker to retreat. So he can force Goldix to retreat out of the village. And he can choose, what he must do is he has to choose an accessible space, all right, which means basically not pushing them back onto a fortification, or forcing them to, so he couldn't force him back onto this mage tower here, for example, or force him back onto another player, for example. But he can use his 3 attack points to force them back onto an accessible spot. So this grass here, or this forest here, as long as he's got enough movement points to push him back into there. So the unmodified movement cost of that terrain. So he could use two movement points to push him back onto this grass, this plane, or he could use 3. Remember, he's got 3 movement points to push Goldix back into this forest. All right. Now, as soon as the attacker forces the blocker to retreat, then the combat ends immediately. Okay. And one other thing to note is that if, I don't know, let's say there was a rampaging enemy here. If I force Goldix to retreat here, although we're moving from one hex adjacent to a rampaging enemy to another hex adjacent to a rampaging enemy, it doesn't provoke that rampaging enemy. Okay, so going back to Goldix here, so Norowas has got 3 attack points left. He can, as we've just seen, choose to use those to push Goldix back into the forest if he wishes. But let's assume he doesn't. Let's assume that he uses 2 to hit Goldix and give him a wound. So Goldix takes a wound, and that part of the melee then ends. They've got 1 attack point left, which is good for nothing. The Herbalists have 2 armour, Goldix has 2 armour. I can't do anything with this 1 attack point left. So now roles reverse. Now Goldix has a chance to attack Norowas in exactly the same way. All right, and so it goes on. The players will alternative 1 melee attack, another melee attack, 1 melee attack, another melee attack, until both players agree that they don't wish to melee attack anymore. Both players pass, or indeed until one player forces the other one to retreat. Okay, so that's player versus player combat in a nutshell. I mean, let's have a little look here. What might Goldix do? Let's run through it again. I've already used a mana from the source, so I can't use any more. But what he may do now is decide to do Rage, attack 2, and then Improvisation, which will give him attack 3. That's attack 5, and discard a card from his hand in order to play Improvisation. So that's attack 5. Okay, so Goldix has got 5 melee attack now just to hit Norowas with. Norowas has got no cards left. Right, so he can't block anything, so it's going to be a full 5 attack, and now Goldix can choose how to spend that however he wishes. Now Norowas has an armour of 2, so each 2 attack points will do 1 damage, so he could choose to do 2 wounds here to Norowas. But let's decide, let's do a mixture. I mean, he could spend 2 of this attack and do 1 wound, and then use 3 to push Norowas back into this forest, and then the combat would end. Now that the combat is over, we need to figure out what the combat outcome was. So in this instance, Norowas attacked Goldix, and Goldix forced Norowas to retreat after they exchanged a couple of wounds. If a player's forced to retreat, then we know the combat's over immediately. That's the end of it. If the combat ended because both players decided to attack no more, then the combat is considered a draw. Okay? If it was a draw, and both players would therefore finish on the same hex, in the case of a draw, the aggressor must withdraw to the space he was attacking from. Okay? So in this case, Norowas walked up round here, so he must withdraw back to these planes. Okay? So ends in a draw, the aggressor must withdraw. Okay, that doesn't mean Norowas didn't do any more, didn't do more wounds than Goldix. It's still considered a draw if neither player forced the other to retreat. Okay, in our instance we did. We had Goldix forced Norowas to retreat here. In this case, then the combat's considered victorious for the player who forced the other to retreat. So in this case, Goldix is considered to be victorious for this combat. And in this case, he can gain some fame. Now, to figure out how much fame Goldix is going to retrieve for being victorious, we need to look at the hero's levels. Our fame track shows us this. They're both level 1. Then there's different situations that can occur. If they're on the same level and the same fame, then nothing happens. Goldix doesn't gain anything as a reward. If, on the other hand, Goldix is on the same level but of a lower fame, then Goldix, for being victorious, will gain 1 fame. if Goldix is on the same level and already has a higher fame, then he gains nothing also. Okay? Alright, so that's the thing to worry about. If your level or fame is the same or higher, you gain nothing. If you're on the same level but of a lower fame, you gain 1 fame for being victorious. If, on the other hand, our player is on a lower level than the one forced to retreat, he gains 1 fame plus 2 for each level he is lower. So in this instance here, I'm 1 level lower, so I'd gain an additional 2 fame. So I'd go from 3 up to 6. Okay? If Noroas is here on level 4 and I'm here on level 2, then I would gain 1 plus 2 times 2, 4, 5. I would gain 5 fame in total, so I'd go from 3 to 8. That'll be enough for me to level up. Okay. Now here's the cool thing. Let's assume that was in fact the case. I went from 3 to 8. I've now, I've got enough fame to level up. I've moved from level 2 to level 3. Because I have fully attended the combat, it acts like a normal turn, and because we're at the end of the turn now, I would actually go through that leveling up process. If I'd only partially attended the combat, it doesn't act like a full turn, and we'll talk about that in a moment when we talk about what happens when you only partially attend the combat. Now the combat has ended, and Goldix here was victorious. Because he fully attended the combat, we go through the normal end of turn process. Okay, so we get to discard our cards and redraw up to 5. All right, so that's the norm. We go through our normal stuff. We re-roll our mana dice, stick it back in the source. All right, and then we'll do the same for Noroas. Right, the important thing to remember is that Goldix has used his turn. So Noroas has had his turn, then it'll be Arathea, and so it will go on. But when it gets back to Goldix's turn, he's just going to flip this thing up, and then it'll be Noroas' turn again. The important thing to remember that because Goldix has fully attended the combat last turn, and he's basically not been able to do anything on his next turn, Noroas or anybody else, could now attack him. He's not had an opportunity to run away or do anything else that he wants to do. But at the same time, while Goldix was there fighting Noroas, Arathea's turn would come, and then Tovak's. For as long as Goldix turn order token here is face down, neither of these two could also attack Goldix. So what's the difference if I only partially attended the attack? Well, it's all pretty much the same. You don't turn your token face down, so that does mean that after Noroas has had his turn, Arathea, Tovak could attack Goldix, and then Goldix will, on his turn, get a full, proper turn. But what difference does it make to the combat? Basically, you can't use mana dice from the source, and you can't use any of your skills, and when the combat's over, the turn is immediately over. Okay, so as the defender, you can't play any healing cards or make use of the terrain that you're on, or you can't draw back up to your hand limit, so you won't be able to draw any more cards. Alright? So if you partially attend the combat, everything else plays exactly the same, but you can't go through the end of turn process, you can't use mana dice from the source, you can't use your skills. I think we've covered quite a lot of ground in that session, so I'm going to end it there. I think I've covered everything, or the main basics of player v player. It's going to add so much more enjoyment to your game and variety to your game and complexity to the game, particularly in the way that you can spend attack points and block attack points, use them to retreat, use them to hit units, use them to hit your fellow players, timing it right. I mean, that's the other thing to note, that you can't attack each other if the end of round's been declared. And likewise, when you're partially attending a combat, you can't declare end of round. But there you go. I'm going to leave it there. Maybe if you have lots of questions, just leave questions, leave comments. If I feel the need to do another session, I will. But I think it's really down to the comments that you guys give me, whether you feel anything else is necessary or not. And that's it from Box of Delights, Mage Knight, player versus player combat.